Okay, so went to the metal shop and into our little scrap pile and picked up a sheet of steel, and we've got it marked out here now a couple different ways as we go through the planning stage of figuring out how exactly and where we want to use this. And then we've also marked out our expanded metal, and we're looking at two different things here. I'm thinking the expanded metal for the shelf where the battery will sit, where the main fuse box will rest above this, and where the transmission fluid cooler radiator thingy will sit. The open mesh will allow air to flow through that radiator, and that should work out well for us. And then the sheet steel is going to be for the heat shield behind the rear seat. So we're going to be laying those two things in here. So down along that lower seat, or lower cross member, underneath the seat is where that expanded metal will go back, and it'll probably extend all the way back to the edge of the transmission linkage cable mount there, and cover that whole flat underneath this whole section here. So it'll go underneath the main fuse box, and all the cabling will sit up on top of it to keep it from dangling or going anywhere. And the battery will sit somewhere here in the middle, and we'll build some more strapping to hold the battery down to that piece. Long term down the line, at some point, I'm going to want to run a 1/4 inch piece of aluminum sheet or an 1/8 inch sheet of steel plate from just underneath the actual VW pan and run it all the way back, literally completely come off that pan, go out, down at an angle, go right underneath the engine cradle so that we drop under the oil pan and shoot all the way back. Now I may end up doing that in 2 pieces so that getting to the oil pan and the tranny drains and other things from below, if needed, can be done with just removing one part of it maybe and not the whole thing. But I'll have to look at that as I go along. It might also be easier because then I could just do a diagonal down to the front and then a flat going back across the bottom somehow. But that's a long ways off. This thing has to drive and run first before we worry about protecting it. So right now we're just going to take the heat shield, it's going to come down and tie right into the seat plates. Right where these tabs for the rear seat to mount on, they're going to hook right in there. And then it's going to come up at an angle and be screwed into this. And it's only going to be as wide as from this tab to that tab over there, because that's the only section where the seat really needs to have this heat pushed back from it. So that's what we're doing. So there it is, the new heat shield, cut, hand bent, fit into place. So it'll get 3 holes punched through to bolt down at the bottom, and I'll probably put 4 to 5 metal tap screws through it into the cross member to hold it up there. And that will act as an excellent heat deflector off the back of the seat and keep people from having any issues, reaching back, touching anything that they shouldn't, as well as helping to keep the seat from getting roasted by motor heat. Okay, next piece to get slid in will be this one. So now we're going to take this expanded metal sheet and figure out its fit into the bottom, and then I'll come back and show you that one next. So our yellow pen, our hammer, and our grinder And we've shaped and fitted this piece of expanded metal. Got a cutout for some electrical and fitting. Or actually no, this side is where the transmission line runs in and runs through here. And then this side is for where the electrical runs in at the fuse box. And then the cutout's up here so it can slip around the middle mounting bracket for the rear frame member. So let's put it together and shove it underneath the rig and see how it fits in there. And there is the shelf. This is the rack sitting underneath the seat that we've created out of this chunk of expanded metal I had. So you can see where we've cut out slots for the electrical to go through there and through here, and a spot over on that side for the shifter linkage cable to come through. And then we cut some notches so that this piece would fit around that middle mounting bracket. Fits completely across the top of the lower cross member and rides back up, bends, and comes across the upper cross member. And so I will weld it along that member. I will weld it along the top of this member, and then at some point when I flip it over, I will weld it to the bottom side because it laps underneath the main bars of this rear frame section, and so that on all four sides it will be welded up and just hanging back there. And that's going to give us our spot to put our transmission cooler right over in that section, our battery somewhere right over here in the middle, and have them sitting up on a little shelf underneath this passenger seat, along with this main fuse box in the same space, and have all of our cables up here tucked in nicely so they can't drag and aren't somewhere where they're going to get snagged on anything. And later when we put some kind of a protective sheet plate down underneath the bottom, it'll be, you know, another 4 to 6 inches below that already, and everything will sit up here nice and tight. We got a way we can strap down a battery and not have it rattling around, and have the cooler here where air can flow up and through and all around it. And by moving the seat out of the way, we can easily reach the main fuse box. Got our heat shield placed in behind it. Getting there, a little bit at a time here, but we're getting there. So we're gonna call it for right now. I'll come back and do some more. Figured out from setting in the battery that it sits about 1.5 inches, maybe inch too high, and rub the bottom of the seat so you can see those yellow marks on the cage down there. Set the battery here inside and marked around it, and I'm gonna have to cut that out and build a lower shelf down below this, which actually kind of works out because I was trying to figure out how I was going to secure the battery and not have it slide around and move everywhere. And so if I cut this hole out and set the battery down in and use the lip of the lower section of that main middle mount that sticks back as the bottom ledge, should be able to maybe even use the cutout piece of expanded metal and turn it the other way, shoot backwards, figure out some way to tie it to the bottom of this, basically just make a lower shelf underneath this one. Put some kind of trim around the 3 sides to keep the battery from slamming into those sharp points of the expanded metal if it moves around. Maybe just get some rubber hose and go around the whole thing with it, slit, so it's got kind of a rubber sleeve around it. That might work and be cheap and easy. Also help to hold the battery in because it wouldn't move around as much. I don't know. Still winging ideas out of my brain, trying to figure out how I'm going to go about doing this now. But definitely going to cut that piece out and probably turn it into a lower shelf down below. Definitely going to turn it into a lower shelf down below. It's just the how. We'll figure that out as we move along, though, like everything in this project. But the next thing we did is we got at least the holes drilled through for the heat shield here, and then peeled all the plastic off the back of it, so it's just paint now, not plastic that will melt with heat. Maybe the white will reflect better, haha. Either way, that's now been sized, so I'm going to go ahead and ram 4 screws through this thing, somewhat-ishly evenly spaced, to mark it and hold it in its place. Nothing exciting though, just a heat shield. Okay, so we've cut out the bottom of the shelf here. Turned the plate that we cut out and lowered it down onto the ledge and welded it in place to be our lower shelf. We took a piece of old oil line from the VW and sliced the back of it, and then wrapped it around the inside of this cutout to act as a bouncer and space between the points on the expanded metal and the battery that's going to be sitting in there. So that's our new little space right there. Gonna have to do some cleanup on some of these old welds there, and maybe do a little cleanup in some of the cuts we did cutting them off. Clean that little space up a bit because I don't like that mess. But I'll either get to that when the whole frame comes out for powder coating or somewhere down the line. But for right now, I've still got to come in to this back spot. But here is the battery. Sits down right like that into a nice little space. Hang on that shelf, and I'll figure out a strap to go over the top of it to hold it down. But once we get the back of the shelf held steady, this should sit right there nice and safe. Not moving around, not bouncing around. Tucked down in the middle of the car. And later when a plate goes underneath the whole thing, it'll be that much even further buried into things. But that's our new battery spot. So we can keep moving forward. Till the next spot.